Well, good evening, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee here. 2 minutes after 7. Apparently, I got signal issues in here tonight, which usually I don't have, so hopefully they will improve. Keep your fingers crossed. But we are, of course, now saying goodbye finally to the remnants of Florence. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some kind of odd things that are going on with respect to the weather models. A few of you have messaged me on Patreon asking me this and elsewhere regarding whether will Florence regenerate or not. And actually there is some evidence on the weather models to indicate that, well, maybe it's not impossible that we could wind up seeing this system regenerate while it's offshore. There's a lot of weird things going on in the upper atmosphere. Looks like the whole pattern is about to change, and we're going to start to see weather fronts moving through rather frequently. All right, there happens to be, I have an issue, folks. Hang on. Looks like I'm back. Hold on. Still's telling me that, you know, I got my little red light on telling me there's a problem here. So at this point, let's move on. Okay, let me just really quick just do a real fast shameless self-promotion. But for those of you who are interested, we've got a combination of everything with respect to my websites and also videos and private videos I do. I have a platform now on Patreon. It's a great way to support my channel and what I do. I've got a couple of tiers for as little as $2 a month, and I do posts and live streams specific only to Patreon members. So if you're interested, I'll put the link up for you, and then you can take a look. There are some posts up there that are open to everybody to see, just to sort of give you a sample of things, and I will leave it up to your discretion and your generosity. Thank you very much. Oh, the stream health just improved, so I guess my internet signal is doing better. So give me 1 second here, and we'll get going. Okay, excellent. All right, looks like whatever was going on, we took some kind of hit. It might all be weather related. I know the folks on Long Island are still waiting for the last of the rain to move out, but if you look at the satellite, Florence, the remnants of Florence kind of also interacted with the a cold front that is moving on through, and if you look carefully, the bottom part of that front, there's a bit of a bulge in the cloud cover. There's going to be a low that's going to come out of this. Now, I have to go back and look. I haven't looked closely enough, but I'm thinking that that's probably more the remnants of Florence as opposed to what's going on with the thunderstorms up to the north. It's probably some weird combination thereof, because the whole thing just got strung out northeast, southwest. But it's from this that a wave is going to develop offshore, and it's from this that models regenerate it, and let me make clear, move it out to the east, okay? It's not going to just regenerate and then turn around and come back. It moves out to the east. It does some weird things when it gets out into the Atlantic, but first things first, it's got to get offshore. On the edge of the picture here, and I'm going to bring up the wide tropical satellite loop. I think that's where the problem is coming from, so I'm going to bring this up front and center now and then get rid of it. These satellite loops that I can get from the Hurricane Center's website, there's some kind of data thing going on. You can see where it's flashing, and that seems to interfere with the internet signal. But a couple of things to point out to here. First off, if you look out in the tropical Atlantic and pointing toward the northwest, that grayish area, that's Saharan dust that's come into the picture again. It's like this gigantic finger that's pointing southeast to northwest across the tropical Atlantic and into the subtropical Atlantic, and it's being pulled up to the north and west of that. There's just gigantic upper low that is off the southeast coast of the United States. So there's a lot of activity going on in the upper layers of the atmosphere out in the Atlantic that is creating conditions at least from 30 degrees south and out into the tropical Atlantic for now, rather unfavorable for development. And that is probably going to hold things at bay for a little while. I kind of thought that we would have a period where we go into, take a bit of a break, but I'm starting to wonder now with what the models have been showing. Now, when we look at the radar right now, the last of the thunderstorms, and there's still some activity going on, some scattered activity in parts of North Carolina, by the way, but these storms that moved through my neck of the woods and through New England today, there were 3 to 5 inch rain amounts in southern New Hampshire and parts of Massachusetts. That extended back along I-90. There was a narrow band of heavier rains that fell up in upstate New York. It was more overrunning in nature, really. And then we had the thunderstorms that came through with these ridiculous dew points. The downpours were, I had to drive in it. It was not fun. But over with, done with, and now we can focus ahead on weather conditions improving. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the GFS, and I think just because of the fact that it's approaching night sleeping time over in Europe, I'll do that first. Veronica Reese, you'll be happy, so you're certainly welcome to stay up for the whole video, but if bedtime is calling, we'll do Europe first today. So let me switch off to the Europe region. And there's a very active period here, and you have a storm. I think it's Ali that is your storm coming in. Of course, the remnant low of Helene is long gone, obviously, but centered right now at 51.7 on the GFS for 8 o'clock tonight, midnight Greenwich time. 51.7, 18.3 west. There's a low that is sitting northwest of northern Scotland that is out there, and it's kind of caught inside the flow of that. So you do have a definable gale center that comes along and races through. Looks like it passes just to the north of the northwest coast of Ireland and then moves into Scotland as the Atlantic low basically absorbs this. And then that pulls out, and then another low approaches on Thursday. This one passes to the south, and it's not nearly as intense, not nowhere close, but it does bring some, some significant rains to Ireland and England and to Scotland as that low goes into the North Sea by midnight Friday, and then you get a little bit of a break, and then here comes another gale center. This one's looking like a powerhouse here for, this is midnight Saturday night. You've got a 974 millibar low approaching the southwest coast of Ireland and moving along the south coast into southern England as a fairly deep storm. So this is a pretty impressive system here that is coming up from the southwest. It's not, as far as I know, I don't think it's tropical in nature. We'll have to trace its roots, which we'll do now on the next map, but I'll quick show you the gales here. Maps courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com, as always. And look at this for the weekend. Big gale. You're talking about a huge area of 50 knot plus winds surrounding the shores of Ireland, the west shore, and the south shore as the low goes by, and then those winds just go nuts too in the Irish Sea. I'll back it up just to show you, just a comparison, okay? So here's the, so this was Helene on Tuesday, which wound up being a little bit weaker than modeled. And then here comes the gale center for tonight for this is 6 a.m. Wednesday, and this is for noon Wednesday. Some strong winds, some gales along the west shores of Ireland, and then eventually up into the Irish Sea, and then beyond, and then that goes out. And then that weak system for Thursday, which really doesn't produce much in the way of wind, but more in the way of rain. And then you've got this thing that comes racing northeastward into Ireland and England with this very strong wind field. And this again would be for, this is 6 p.m. Saturday. Gales just getting to the southwest coast of Ireland, and then Saturday night into Sunday, assuming it holds the same idea. We're going to go now to the full wide Atlantic view so we can take a look at what's happening here. Okay, I kind of jumped ahead, so let's go back to this, and I think we'll put the precip one on because that at least we can follow a bit better. So here's your frontal boundary that we're watching here along the East Coast that's moving out, and it really doesn't go very far, but there's your wave that develops. This is overnight, and then that wave starts to move to the east and southeast, or south of due east, and there it goes southeast, and it's starting to intensify here. The northern eastern part of this breaks away, and it's from that that you wind up getting this wrapped up animal. But in the meantime, let me just run it back. So if this represents Florence, the remnants of Florence, it looks like it wants to develop this back into a tropical system here, judging by how tight the isobars are. And then you've got that gale center. So you're watching two things here. The breakaway low that develops and then deepens. What I mean when I say deepen, I mean intensify. That's another word for it. And heads for the south coast of Ireland on Sunday. Meanwhile, there's what could be Florence, and dropping southeast and southward, just sits out there, and then starts to turn back westward. Okay? Of course, there are other things at this point, and we're deep into the long range, so who knows if this is right. Every model run lately while showing something rejuvenating there, has been doing all sorts of different things with it. So let's lay the puzzle out, and this way at least we know what we can look for as far as happening in the upper air that's driving all this. So there's your jet stream. Actually, that's a fairly active jet. We pointed out yesterday just how strong the jet stream was going to be across Canada, and that much of Canada was going to be cold for the next 2 weeks. But the remnant that is Florence, you start to see it, the troughing here that's off the east coast, that's moving eastward. And there you finally see it kind of separates there. You've got the Canadian jet running along the upper Midwest, the big high, upper high off the East Coast, the base of the westerly winds from Canada, up down to about New York City or so. But the system that represents Florence just kind of gets left behind here. And by the way, there's your gale center. The top, there's a short wave that comes off of Canada here that's at the top of this jet. That becomes the big storm that goes in to Ireland for Sunday. So that's not tropical in nature. Obviously. You also have a big storm of some kind in between Labrador and Greenland at the moment, and a trough that extends southward, but it separates from that. It never really gets caught in it. And on this particular run, there's another short wave that comes off eastern Canada a week from today. Well, it misses that one. And then this is where it kind of gets really dicey. It's dicey enough that it misses misses that trough. It becomes even more dicey because now all of a sudden you've got the model building a ridge from the Gulf of Mexico northeastward out into the Atlantic south of Newfoundland. And here we go again with this sort of cradling, the ridge cradling it around. And in the meantime, by the way, the jet stream in Canada starts to drop further south into the middle Mississippi Valley, and you actually get some reasonably cool air that tries to come in to parts of the Great Lakes and in the northern plains. Where we are after this, I have no idea. I mean, this was just, I found this kind of funny, actually, that it did this. Takes it west and then west-northwest, then you got a deep trough that comes into the east, and it lifts up toward Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and into Labrador. And by funny, I mean the fact that the models do these sort of weird things sometimes when they get into the long range, and it's very hard to take them seriously. But we can at least focus on what the keys are going to be if something is going to. First of all, first things first, it's got to regenerate, okay? You've got to get something to regenerate. Then, if it does it separate from the main westerlies like it does here? You see how it's here it is, part of the flow, then it separates, okay? So does it do that? That's the first question. Then, you have this deep storm that forms up between Labrador and Greenland. The trough doesn't really catch it. It separates it separates itself from that. That goes on its merry way to the northeast. So you have to assume that that is going to be correct, which we don't know. And here we are again, the ridges building on either side. So it's a lot of puzzle pieces here. It makes for fascinating meteorology in the long range. It could also very much be fascinating fiction here. So just bear that in mind. The other thing I wanted to point out with respect to the tropics is I want to go to the European model at this point. Well, first off, we could switch off to the European here, so at least you could see a comparison. This is for next Monday, by the way. So, but just to show you what the European's upper air is, the European handles this differently to some respect. Here we go for Wednesday and Thursday, and that represents Florence separating from the trough, from the jet stream flow. The European also has a strong storm going into Ireland and over into Scotland. It looks like a powerhouse on that model too. The only difference here is that the big difference is that the European brings this system that goes into between Labrador and Greenland further south, so it actually winds up picking Florence up. Although it eventually does leave it behind and then drives it southwest where there's all sorts of other weird things are going on. So look, I'm going to be fascinated to watch this play out over the next 3 or 4 days. Let's see what happens when it goes offshore and what it does, and if it winds up rejuvenating or not. And you know what? Chances are, even if it is, this is just going to be, this is really going to be something for just out of the ocean. I can't, the odds of it really defying all that's going on and somehow getting back are so long at this point that they're not even worth considering. The one thing I will mention, though, and I noticed this in the long range the last number of days on the GFS and the European too, the area, I think we need to watch the area in the Caribbean in the longer haul. Going out a week from now, I think there's a fair chance that something is going to try to come out of there toward the end of the month. I talked about this the last couple of days. The model runs, still indicating the idea of lower pressures across much of the Caribbean. We'll have to see whether upper air conditions are going to cooperate or not. The GFS has been trying to develop something there for a number of runs, although it never seems to get it closer to real time. It keeps showing it at 300 hours or more out, and it doesn't ever seem to get inside that 300-hour time frame yet. But the general idea is, I think, that you're going to wind up with lower than normal pressures here in about 10 days. So there's still stuff going on, and the tropics are certainly not done. I think we're going to see some interesting activity going forward. And we're all going to be learning new things because, as we saw with Florence, the unusual nature of where it was, and the fact that it came all the way back and hit the East Coast, first time since 1951, first storm on record to be up in that that kind of got its act together, became a hurricane in that position so far north, and still managed to hit the U.S. So look, if that's something that's going to be new to the scene, who knows what else we have to look forward to. Okay, so let's come back home, and we'll put the full U.S. view here, and we'll put the precip on. Of course, we're going to change models. Whoops. There we go. Okay, so let's get the precip up. So where are we going over the next few days? Well, typically with the GFS, with the cool, dry air that's moving in now, with the high that you see there building to the north of us, is nothing like what was modeled last week. And this is why I want to be careful here, because the models have been overdoing these short waves and underdoing the strength of the ridge, and it seems to be the case here. And we might have to carry that through for a while into the long range, maybe not completely through, because I do happen to believe that eventually that Canadian jet's going to become more important. But that high goes out, and we've got another cold front approaching. Now there will be, this system here, by the way, is the one that winds up becoming the deep storm eventually between Labrador and Greenland. So this is going to wrap up, and there's probably going to be some severe weather to contend with in the upper Midwest here, along about late Thursday night with some heavy rains. And then it moves away to the northeast, and of course the cold front that approaches, as wrapped up as that system is, a 980-ish low, 988 low, the front, it doesn't have a whole lot of tropical moisture to work on. So the shower activity with it looks like it pretty much falls apart as it approaches the east coast. And yes, that is snow moving across southern Canada there. So the weekend will bring another high with slightly cooler air, although it goes in and out really fast. It's already to Maine by early Sunday, but we are going to see that frontal boundary from Friday stall to the south. Another high tries to build in. More of that builds up further north this time around for Monday. That frontal boundary still to the south as it waits for energy to come out of the plains again, and that runs up to the western lakes with what appears to be a stronger cold front for a week, 7 or 8 days from now. So the pattern does look, if you watch the run through all the way to 360 to 384, and by the way, if you look on the far right, those isobars, that is from Florence again. You can see it making an appearance just like it did on prior runs. And this is where you start to ask yourself whether the GFS is correct. There is support for the idea that we're going to have the strengthening jet stream in Canada and a deeper trough driving into the east later in the long-range period. So this would be a fairly strong cold front coming through with a pretty healthy shot of chilly air. Look at that. It's got a lake effect here going on by the time we get to the first days of October. It's in the long range. We don't know, okay? Let me just make that clear, all right? But just to reinforce what we were talking about yesterday, here we go. Let's see. I think the North America view would do well here. We'll come back to the jet stream here going into the longer term. So there's the ridge suddenly disappears and the trough wants to go out to the west. The ridge wants to go out to the west. But let's start from the beginning here, where we still have this bit of a flat ridge here in the east, trough mostly in the west. But the ridge stays flat. It doesn't really punch all the way up. You notice the base of the westerlies comes down to about southern New Jersey, so that at least allows some of the cooler Canadian air to bleed in. If you look out to the right, that is what represents Florence. Again, assuming the GFS is correct, which we don't know. The European wants to just kind of pick it up and take it to the northeast and leave it closer to the Azores. But we do have a major trough on this run of the GFS for the middle of next week, for a week from today. And that starts to kind of pinwheel fronts through, and then you get a deep trough toward the end of the period with some fairly cool air. The anomalies will reflect what's going on in Canada, by the way, in that if we go through the 2-week period, you'll notice that for much of the time, for a vast majority of time, Canada's cold for the most part. There are some intrusions of warmer air into eastern, southeastern Canada every so often, but the vast majority of Canada is showing below average temperatures throughout much of the long-range period, which takes us now into the beginning of October. So if you're a fan of fall weather, root for this GFS, because this has a couple of decent shots of cool air coming down. And if you think back to the last couple of autumns where we've had this sort of extension of summertime into October with a ridge in the east, the GFS and the European, by the way, are arguing that, well, maybe this is going to be different this year. And here's the European. Same idea. If you look at the European going forward, colder than average temperatures throughout most of Canada for most of the time during its 10-day time frame. And its upper air, perhaps just to compare, so this is a week from Wednesday, and that's how broad bowl, what I would describe as the broad bowl type trough here, with a little bit of ridging now in the west. The ridge in the east has moved off the east coast, and you've got the flow coming in from northwest Canada into the Great Lakes. And the GFS, you know, kind of the same idea. It has a more dynamic looking trough a little bit further west in the plains, at least initially, before it winds up trying to swing it around. It does kind of hold a little bit of ridging there off the southeast coast. That's separating it, the trough, from what it perceives to be Florence, I guess. And then finally you get into a deep trough late in the period. That's all going to change. That's the one thing I can tell you that I know I'm going to be right on for sure, is that this is all going to change as we move through the rest of this week. So let's let's do it this way, okay? We're going to just watch and see the next 3 or 4 days what happens with respect to the remnants of Florence and what goes out offshore, and we'll be watching that with some interest. We're going to watch the rest of the tropics to see what happens there, especially when we get into next week and later next week. To me, it looks like maybe something in the Caribbean may eventually go. And then, of course, the bigger question is the weather pattern across North America, and how does that when do the models get a really good, clear picture of how that's all going to evolve? So definitely a lot going on here for this time of year. A lot of interesting things happening. Oh, let me real fast. I might as well just do this. Let's take a look. We are, this is a time of year, and someone on my Patreon page did find a snow cover map from the Canadian Weather Service, and they and sent it to me. And there really is very little snow cover at the moment, but the GFS on its 10-day map, and this is where, again, it's useful. We have no skin in the game here in terms of the amounts, but if it's got the general idea of where the snow is going to fall, we can we're okay with that. And it's been fairly consistent over the last several days. This is 10-day snowfall, by the way. What we don't know is, of course, obviously, in many areas of Canada, it's still not cold enough for that snow to stay on the ground and begin the permanent snow cover. Maybe up in the northernmost provinces, yeah, that may be the case, but in the southern areas, I would think it's probably a little bit too early, except maybe in the mountains, assuming that all plays out, which I think there's a fair chance that something like this will occur. And we'll be watching now, particularly the month of October, watching the snow cover growth across North America to see how fast and how far south it gets. And also, of course, we will be looking at Siberian snow cover. As soon as the Weather Service fixes the website, fix your snow cover website, please, okay? So hopefully they'll do it soon, and we'll have our fingers crossed on that. I got it. It just reminded me. I'm gonna send a message to my buddy meteorologist Bill Goodman, who works at the Weather Service, and maybe he could forward it along in terms of trying to get that accomplished. So back to the boards tonight. We're 30 minutes into this live stream. It's nice to see everybody here, even when we are not dealing with a major hurricane. You can't have them, running around all the time, thankfully. By the way, sadly, the death toll in North Carolina, the last I heard a little while ago, was now up to 32. The MDR, David Schwartz, is basically the tropical Atlantic south of 20 degrees north, going out to the African coast. That's referred to as the MDR. Snow 99 wolves. It's not impossible that you could see it in September up in Canada, okay? And yeah, Weather Hub TV, the European and the GFS also both show this really tiny system in the tropical Atlantic. I think somewhere around 15 and 50, or between 50 and 55, somewhere in there. But it's like really, it's minuscule. You could barely see it. It looks like almost another barrel. The Hurricane Center, by the way, is not mentioning anything. Hold on. I have to get rid of someone. One moment. 1101, or what is that? I'm sorry. T space 1 space 0 1. You said the 4-letter word that I can't accept on this channel. You poor dear. That's the HARP word. So goodbye. He's gone. Another know-it-all conspiracy theorist, flat earth loving person bites the dust. Next, anybody, any more of you out there? Post a comment, because you'll be banned as well, and I'm going to enjoy every minute, every second of doing it. You will be in exile forever. Chris Alley, you got a double rainbow. Yeah, this is definitely was double rainbow night for Long Island. The timing of the storms and the fast clearing behind it definitely made for some pretty decent rainbow activity. Let's see. Snow and Ice Center website is hard to follow with all the data links. Actually, John Curie, I'll Google up a link here. Hang on a second. Cover North America. This is the one I like because it's very easy to use, and again, unfortunately, it ain't working. In fact, it's not even opening for me. Hold on. This is the snow cover one that I like, and you'll notice if you try to use it, all the GIFs or the GIFs, I never know how to pronounce that, they all come up broken. So hopefully they'll get it fixed soon enough. So dual rainbow at Kennedy, Rich Rothmansky, excellent. I love double rainbows. They are so cool. I think it was last year at one point. I saw, sometimes the double part, the second part of the rainbow is weaker and fainter. But I saw one last year near my house that was almost a perfect double. Both were stunning in their colors. It was quite the experience to see that. Always makes you feel good to see a rainbow. It is amazing. It always brings a smile to most people's faces. Certainly does to mine. Okay, the second part was very weak. Delvin, during the major hurricane coverage, I just stayed to the sidelines. Why? I was wondering where you've been. I hadn't seen you. Oh, you sent me John, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. So I posted the one from NCDC. That was... That is the NOAA site that I like to use, because you could actually go, you can get tighter pictures of it instead of the wider shots. But once it becomes relevant, we start to get some sizable snow cover. I definitely will show it. You had lawn bubbles here because of the amount of water in the ground, Johnny Quest. I imagine you have to be. You've got to be all swamped up. And Colt Sheffield, yeah, it would be kind of nuts if Florence were to regroup somehow and come back alive, but let's let it happen first. We'll see before we get too wrapped up in it. And frankly, I've had enough. It's been a long haul dealing with that storm. Okay, so one more time. Okay, shameless self-promotion, but here we go again. If you'd like, you can join the Patreon platform. It's just a couple of bucks a month, and you'll get my website posts. You can message me directly at any time. By the way, I will respond to you in a timely manner. If you have questions for me, or you have some some weather thing you want to discuss, or some questions, whatever it is, you can message me on Patreon, and I have the link up there. Call CJC Freedom. It's going to regroup but not come back. That is really the most likely scenario, okay? That it regroups and maybe develops. If it does develop, that it would just stay out there in the ocean. I just always find those weird tracks fascinating, in how they interact with the changing upper air and the relative instability of the models, especially as we go out into the longer term. So, southeast Texas has been raining for 2 weeks in a row, says Cold Sheffield, and we're dealing with the water. And to have something form in the Gulf would suck. Well, yeah, I would. I'd agree with you. I think, judging for what I'm seeing, I mean, nothing is guaranteed, obviously, and we are talking 10 days out. I mean, eventually, you should get some of this rain out of the way. Just going to look really fast. Didn't pay, I've been paying, whenever there's a lot of local weather going on, there's not a whole lot of time for me to look elsewhere, but I'm doing this off camera here at the moment. But it looks like, you do get a bit of a break over the next 2 days. Doesn't look like a whole lot of widespread, maybe some scattered activity. And then it comes back Friday and into the weekend, because you're going to have you're going to start to fire up the next storm system for early next week. That's going to come out of the Central Rockies. So you do have some convection developing over the weekend, and then much of the energy with that system that I'm talking about for next week is pretty far to your north. So you're probably going to get some kind of a break. And if the GFS is correct, by the way, you will eventually get some meaningful relief get a major cold front to come down into the Gulf and, start to drive a stake through the heart of the Gulf of Mexico hurricane season. Usually when the first major front comes through, that tends to shut off the tropical activity there. It doesn't always work out that way. Most years it does, but sometimes it doesn't, and it lingers on. I remember during Florence, says Delvin, there were 380 people in the live stream. Yeah, we had up a couple of times, broke over the 400 400 number. Don't worry about the toxic comments, Delvin, because I've got a couple of moderators lurking about, and myself, and I have discovered through all of this how much I truly enjoy getting rid of these people off my live streams. And you know what? Look, here we have a major hurricane going on. Okay, people's lives are at stake and in danger. I don't want to overstate it, but yeah, look what happened. And we have a death toll of 32 and counting. And you have people that come on that don't even think twice about posting things like that it's all fake, that it's all being done by CGI. I mean, how stupid can you be? I mentioned, I think I said this yesterday, and I'll repeat it again. I had one of those people that I banned messaged me on Facebook and forgave me for blocking him, but recognized the fact that I was nothing but being part of the sheep, part of the cattle, being led around by the nose, and on and on and on. And I responded with 2 sentences. My first sentence was, it's very hard for me to take anyone seriously who goes by the screen name, and his screen name was Smooth, and then fill in the blank with a part of the male anatomy. Okay? And then I said, and this is the thing that really saddened me about it was this was a young person. This was somebody, probably in their 20s, and it just saddened me. And I just said, you need to go back to school and take a science course. I mean, look, it's one thing to question. It's a healthy thing to question when the standard society norms and all those things. It's fine to question it, but for God's sake, the earth is flat? I mean, really? Don't waste my time. And don't waste the time of my audience who's here to watch, some, let's call it semi-serious meteorology with sometimes a bit of a sense of humor. And I don't need this nonsense. And neither do you, those of you who come here every day. So, look, I will try. It's hard for me to see when I'm doing the maps. I can't see your chat at the same time. So sometimes when you see, a weird, if something changes on the screen where you get the YouTube channel looks like it's showing up on the screen, it's because I'm looking to see what's on the chat board and making sure that you're seeing what you're supposed to see at the same time. So I'm trying to make sure my show's showing up right. You've seen it happen with me enough times where I've kind of lost, I forget to enlarge the screen so you can see the maps and all. As I'm trying to make sure that you guys are getting a good weather experience, a weather map experience, but I can't watch the chat board at the same time. So don't worry. Just I will come when I come back to the chat from here on in. We will have a joyous celebration as we start knocking off the flat earthers, the geoengineers, the weather control people, and anybody else that just displays a certain discourtesy and ignorance, because I'm not going to tolerate it. Okay, and that's, by the way, another plus to the Patreon page, is because the videos that we do there are also troll free, flat earther free, and geoengineering free. All right, let's end it here. Thank you so much for being here. My stomach is screaming because it's saying, Joe, you need to eat dinner. So I'm going to go eat my dinner. We're at 7:43 Eastern Time. Any radars we showed you earlier and satellites, of course, are dated. So if you've got weather threatening in your area, please be sure to check your local National Weather Service website at weather.gov. Thanks to Tropical Tidbits for the use of the maps. Always remember to consult the Weather Service of the Hurricane Center if we come to a point again where we're having to make decisions. Those are your go-to pages. And you can also, one other way that you can support my channel, if it's not through joining Patreon, if you do shop on Amazon, I'll put the Amazon link up, and that'll work too, because we are a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and their affiliated sites. So you shop on Amazon, you get your stuff. Amazon throws me back some coin out of their pocket. I can get a couple of cigars and some coffee with that, and everybody is happy. The link does not work, Colt Sheffield. Yeah, I know exactly. That's I'm going to message my buddy and have them see if they can forward a message up the chain to get it fixed. It's been broken for a while, so I'm wondering whether there's a server issue and they don't have the government hasn't appropriated the money to fix it or not. I don't know. Mirtha Gunter, always good to see you here. CJC Freedom, welcome aboard. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. And yes, Brock Tate, now the flat earthers are calling it what? The infinite plane? It doesn't stop. No, it's actually, I've said this, the earth is actually a tiered structure. It's 3 tiers with, of course, the higher the tier, the better off you are. I mean, it just gets sillier and sillier. By the way, I'm a big fan of The Crown, the Netflix series The Crown, and of course the whole cast is changing when the new season comes out. And I was so happy that I think it was Claire Foy, who played Queen Elizabeth, got the Emmy last night. I didn't watch the Emmys at all, but my daughter messaged me today to let me know that she won the Emmy for Best Actress, and I kind of had a feeling that that's what they were going to do. She was terrific. So if you haven't watched The Crown, watch it. It's really good. If you like history and at least this perspective of it, it looked like it held pretty close to what actually happened. Maybe a little bit of creative license, but not a whole lot. I really enjoyed it very much, so I recommend it highly. Yes, Veronica Reese, it's brilliant. And the actress Olivia Colman, is it, from Broadchurch, which was another series I watched and I really liked. She's playing she's going to be playing the older Elizabeth when the next season comes out. So I can't wait for that. All right, folks. Have a great evening. James, NASCAR fan, you're saying hi and I'm saying goodbye because we're done tonight. The live stream's over, but you can watch it on the replay. Have a great evening, folks. We'll see you tomorrow. I'll see what's going on and how I feel because I've been going pretty solid straight through for the last 2 weeks, and the body is screaming time to relax a little bit. But we'll see. It'll probably keep the schedule the way it is. Have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow.